China's buying gold and dumping the dollar. Everybody panic! Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Chinese people are buying gold. A lot of gold. Videos circulating on social media showed hundreds of thousands of people lining up to buy gold during the Chinese New Year. Wow, and I thought the line to get in the Cheez-Its diner was bad. Hey, I don't judge what you did with your weekend. But if it didn't involve getting a piece of cheesecake with a giant Cheez-It on top of it, you made better life choices than I do. So, why are Chinese people buying gold like there's no tomorrow? I may have mentioned once or twice that the Chinese economy is not doing well. There's the real estate market collapse, the recent stock market crash, and record high youth unemployment. Things are so bad, China's wealthy are moving to Japan. Yes, Japan. That would be like Americans moving to our greatest historical enemy, Canada. But don't worry, the Chinese Communist Party has a solution. She-conomics! That's right, she-conomics. And the Chinese people have been so reassured by she-conomics that they're rushing out to put their money in gold, which is what people do during times of uncertainty and turmoil. Am I saying that Chinese people don't trust the CCP? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. No one wants to buy real estate right now, despite the CCP trying to convince people to come on in, the market's fine. Pro tip to the CCP, if you're trying to make people feel better about the stability of the real estate market, maybe ground shaking isn't the right word to use. Chinese people don't want to put their money in the stock market either, even with she-conomics. Unbelievable. So people, especially young people, are buying gold. Gold bars, tiny gold beans, gold jewelry, and gold whatever this is. Chinese people are buying so much gold that gold prices have hit record highs. That's despite high US interest rates and a strong dollar, both things that normally bring down the price of gold. But there is a growing sentiment that the gold market is governed no longer by economic factors, but by the whims of Chinese buyers and investors. This is not good news for China's economy. First, it says that despite the CCP's ongoing propaganda about how the economy is doing great, it's actually still bad. Chinese people feel like they don't have a safe place to put their money, so they're using it to buy gold, which is also bad for China's economy. China has always struggled with weak consumer demand. Turns out, in a country where no one trusts the government, people don't want to spend so much money. Saving money, like in gold, makes people feel more secure. And that can distort an economy. After all, Chinese people's vast savings fueled China's real estate boom. At one point, 70% of people's wealth was stored in real estate, which was a problem when the real estate boom became a real estate bust. The CCP has spent years trying to get people to stop saving so much money and spend it in order to help China's economy grow. Instead, people are now hoarding gold like they're Smaug. In some cases, people are using gold to transfer their money overseas, which they see as being safer than China. The CCP has strict controls on the amount of money that's allowed to leave the country. So people are getting around that by buying gold bars small enough to take in their carry-on luggage. Let's just hope people don't resort to smuggling gold in more uncomfortable ways. But it's not just Chinese people buying gold. China's central bank, the PBOC, has been buying record amounts of gold. That's leading some people to say it's actually the US economy, not China, that's really in trouble. I'll tell you why after the break. Welcome back. China's central bank has been steadily buying gold for the last year and a half. Last year, the bank bought more gold than any other central bank in the world, adding more to its reserves than it had in nearly 50 years. At the same time, China's central bank has been selling their holdings of US Treasury bonds. Last month, Bloomberg came out with a headline about China selling a record sum of US bonds. These two things combined led to some explosive, panicky headlines. China is ramping up de-dollarization. China's gold buying spree could be the straw that breaks the dollar's back. China's gold rush means they're gonna invade Taiwan. Oh God, the dollar's done for. America's economy is over. Run for the hills! Shelley, take all of our company's savings and buy gold coins. We gotta smuggle it up our butts as we flee to Canada. Wait, what's that, Shelley? Uh-huh. 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 Are you saying people are wrong on the internet? Well, everyone, turns out none of those headlines are true. Well, the CCP might invade Taiwan, but it's not because they're buying gold. Here's what really happened. Yes, China's central bank has bought a lot of gold, and they have sold some US bonds. But China isn't breaking the dollar's back. And it might not even be de-dollarizing, that is, moving away from the US dollar at all. Here's the problem. Math. Don't change the channel. I promise you this is going to blow your mind. Bloomberg looked at US Treasury data and calculated that China sold about $53 billion of US bonds during the first 3 months of the year, which is a record-breaking amount. However, a rough calculation, even using the recent highest gold prices, shows China only bought around $1.5 billion worth of gold in the first 3 months of the year. So the CCP is clearly not selling $53 billion of US bonds and then putting it all in gold. So why are people making a big deal out of this? 2 reasons. 1, there's this idea that the CCP could at any moment sell a bunch of US debt and wreak havoc on the US economy. That simply isn't true. I'm not going to get into all of the reasons that wouldn't work, but the basic idea is doing that would really screw with China's economy, while not really damaging the US. In fact, some people think it would actually help the US. Anyway, the point is that China suddenly selling a record-breaking amount of US debt isn't a problem, because other people are buying that same US debt. In the same amount of time that China supposedly sold $53 billion of US treasuries, Japan alone bought $51 billion of US treasuries. And a lot of other countries bought US bonds too. So no, this is not going to wreck the US economy. The second reason people are making a big deal about China selling US bonds and buying gold is more serious. People believe this is part of China de-dollarizing, or moving away from the US dollar. If this was successful, it would have huge financial and geopolitical impacts around the world. The US would lose a lot of political influence with other countries, which the Chinese Communist Party would be pretty happy about. But is China really moving away from the dollar? Not exactly. Here's where the mind-blowing stuff starts. It turns out China didn't actually sell a record-breaking amount of US debt earlier this year. Here's why. We don't know for sure how much China has in foreign reserves, or how much of their foreign reserves are in dollars or euros or other currencies. China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange occasionally release data on how big China's foreign reserves are in general, but most of the data remains a secret. I know, the CCP hiding data, who would have guessed? So how do we know how much China has in US treasuries? Well, the US Treasury releases data on that, but it's limited to amounts held directly by US banks for foreign countries. We know that China actually holds some of its US bonds through other countries, mainly Belgium right now. Yep, Belgium, waffles, chocolate, and US debt. Belgium holds US debt for China through a bank called Euroclear. And according to Brad Stetzer, a former US Treasury official and a senior fellow at CFR, it looks like the US Treasury data for Belgium could be wrong. Instead of selling US bonds, it looks like Belgium bought a lot of US bonds. Ultimately, this means that with the corrected Belgium data, China only sold $16 billion of US bonds, not $53 billion. So yes, China still sold US debt, but not the record sums that made headlines. Still, you might say, Chris, that doesn't matter. The CCP is still selling US bonds. They're still getting rid of the US dollar. Look at this chart. It clearly shows that China is dumping US Treasury bonds. Back in 2021, China had $1.1 trillion in US Treasury bonds. Now, they only have $767 billion, according to US Treasury data. But not so fast. This doesn't include the Belgium data. And that's important because the CCP hates that the US Treasury publishes this data. The Treasury only started doing this in 2011. And ever since then, the CCP has been doing more and more to hide its actual data by using proxy countries like Belgium. And as China has been selling US treasuries, Belgium has been buying them. The dramatic fall in US treasuries also doesn't include other dollar assets that China owns, like hundreds of billions of dollars in agency bonds, which are issued by US government agencies like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, equities, and even US bank accounts. If you look at the full data, it looks like China isn't moving away from the US dollar or dollar bonds at all. In fact, it looks like China's holdings of US assets have basically been stable. But that's not as sexy as the idea that China is looking to defeat the dollar. So how was everybody so wrong? Does the CCP even want to defeat the dollar? Well, the CCP wants the rest of the world to think it could defeat the dollar. All the stuff about de-dollarization is great for CCP propaganda. But at the end of the day, the CCP really needs to save China's economy. And the truth is, they can't do that without the US dollar. China relies on the dollar for international trade, for controlling the value of its own currency, and for its huge trade surplus. But will the CCP eventually replace the US dollar? Well, I actually talked about this in an episode from last year. I'll put the link below. Ah, boy, that was complicated. But we got through it. What's that, Shelley? We haven't even talked about China's shadow reserves. They're still hiding trillions of dollars on top of this? Oh, God. I think I need some Cheez-Its. You know, the CCP hates that we expose their secrets like we did on this episode. Chinese state-run media even called China Uncensored disgraceful anti-China garbage. But I can't make this show without your help. Like, subscribe, share, and if you can, contribute even just $1 an episode on patreon.com/China Uncensored. I don't have access to trillions of US treasuries. I make about 16 episodes a month, but if $1 an episode is too much for you, you can set a monthly limit. So you can ensure I can keep uncensoring China for even $1 a month. And as a thank you to everyone who gives on Patreon, I'll respond to one of your questions or comments at the end of these episodes. Lily Chen had a comment on our episode about what the CCP would do to Taiwan if it invaded. She says, "I'm not all that worried. Any occupational force will have to deal with the psychological damage my grandmother will inflict upon them as she bitches at them. Truly, I pity the PLA soldiers." Well, Lily, that's the kind of dark humor I'm proud to feature on China Uncensored. And it's an important reminder that the Taiwanese people won't take an invasion lying down. They will defend themselves. And psychological damage from grandma is a powerful weapon. I've also long said that what the CCP truly fears is the inevitable granny uprising. Look at this video. Chinese grannies pushed away a parked car so they could have space to dance. You don't want to mess with the grannies. And Lily, say hi to your grandmother for me. I want to stay on her good side. Thank you for your support, Lily. Thank you for watching. Head over to Patreon by clicking on that orange button. And if you didn't know, I also talk about news, politics, and philosophy through the lens of gaming on my new show, Deep Thoughts While Gaming. The latest is why people who know the least know it the loudest, through the lens of Halo Infinite. Click here and let me know what you think. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.